today. And so I want to get right down to business. And before I do that, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself here, because I want to try and keep this to about 30-35 minutes. So, as my father used to tell me, there'll be no shucking and jiving today. And so if you have questions, send those to me via chat. Everyone is muted. And when we have a break in the action, I will unmute you, or I'll answer your question directly in the chat. If you want me to unmute you, raise your hand and I'll do that. And then we can have a dialogue um, um, back, back and forth. So, really quickly, I'm going to be saying some things that you've probably never heard before, especially from a pharmacy benefits management company. But here's why. I've been in this industry now for over 2 decades. For the past 2 decades, all I've ever done is pharmacy. I started out with Eli Lilly as a drug sales rep, landed inside a corporate office as a part of a market access team, and we were charged with negotiating, paying rebates back to pharmacy benefit managers. I eventually left Eli Lilly. I started my own mail order pharmacies and ran that between 2005 and 2010, nationally licensed. Between those two experiences, I learned a lot about contracting from a manufacturer standpoint with pharmacy benefit managers, and as a pharmacy with both PBMs and drug wholesalers. Becoming frustrated with the poor reimbursements and the kind of strong arming coming from drug wholesalers, and what it would cost us to put goods on the shelf, caught in between, I said, listen, if you can't beat them, join them. 2010, launched Transparent RX, which was at the time the first fiduciary model pharmacy benefit management company. There might be one or two others today. There's more talk now than there's ever been around a fiduciary pharmacy benefit management company. I don't know if they are or aren't. I have not seen their contracts to determine whether or not it stacks up to the standard of care that is thrust upon a fiduciary in any industry. And so, listen, it is in my best interest to bust open the black box, folks. It is to help you, and it is consistent with our business model. So I want to tell you and teach you whatever I know. And so that's just a little bit about me. A lot of talk in the news of the PBM Transparency Act, and rebates, PBMs forming group purchasing organizations, and there's just a lot of stuff in the news right now geared towards driving more transparency in the PBM industry. I could probably have a separate webinar on why I believe that some of those efforts won't work. Number one is it's too late. Some of those PBMs have already shifted those costs elsewhere outside of the core PBM service offering. So they saw this coming 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? So that's one reason. So listen, by the end of this presentation, I want you to know how PBMs make money. In order to change some of the practices, what I would call deceptive practices that you're going to learn today, you're going to have to feel something other than indifference. If you don't have fire, and listen, before I go any further, when I talk about, and the things I say is to the benefit of patients and the companies that provide those pharmacy benefits to those patients. And then after all of that is done, we just hope to make enough money for ourselves to pay the bills, send our kids to nice schools, and buy homes. That's it, right? That's it. So I want you to feel something other than indifference about what you learn, because if you don't have fire in the belly, nothing's going to change. If you don't have fire in your belly, nothing's going to change. And so once you have that fire in the belly, then I want you to start taking action around the primary problem. It's not uh, bigger discount guarantees off of AWP. It's not bigger minimum rebate guarantees. That's not the primary problem. It's not spread pricing, right? The primary problem in the industry is what we refer to as information asymmetry. It's an economic theory that just simply says this: when two parties are sitting at the negotiating table, the party with the better information and or the the better knowledge to interpret the information that they have, they are going to use that information to their financial advantage. And that is exactly what PBMs have been doing now for the better part of 2 decades, leveraging information asymmetry, because through information asymmetry, it makes it difficult for you to calculate how much money they're making. It's easier to get away with overcharging when you don't know how much the overcharge actually is. And a lot of decision makers have just kind of, accepted this as a standard operating procedure with very, very little pushback. And the PBMs aren't the only ones that are in on information asymmetry. So let me show you here really quickly an example of information symmetry or information success. Everyone knows PBMs get paid rebates. And the PBMs that are leveraging those rebate dollars to keep some of those funds in their bank account don't want to provide a receipt for the payments, the rebate payments that they take in. That receipt is what's referred to as a rebate remittance form. Typically, what happens is a plan, when it is paid rebates by a PBM, it may just get an invoice that says uh, retail 30 brand drugs. Here's the bucket of dollars that are being paid. Retail 90 brand drugs. Here are the bucket of dollars that are being paid. Mail specialty, same thing, without any claim level detail. The point of having this type of information is so that you can calculate lowest net costs. How can you calculate net cost if you don't know what the actual rebate payment is for that specific claim? So this is something that we provide to our clients every time rebates become due. And I will also add, and this is probably the second insight or third insight already today. But I do want to add that plan ID, field date, the National Association Boards of Pharmacy, the pharmacy identifier number, the RX number, all that stuff is populated for our clients, but for obvious reasons, for privacy reasons, we don't put that information in here. This is very, very powerful stuff to have this sort of information. So that leads me to the status quo. PBMs prefer that their clients enter into an agreement with them that calls for an artificially too low administrative fee. But artificially too low administrative fee, let's just start at, say, $6 per paid claim. And it all really depends on the underwriting and the size of the group and things. But let's just say industry average, $6 per paid claim and below. It's artificially too low. What that then does is gives the green light to the PBM to augment those artificially too low admin fees through these three buckets here primarily. Not only $6 per claim, but some plans aren't paying any administrative fee. You may as well just hand over your checkbook and just say, "Hey, fill it out uh, as you go. Just fill it out as you go." Now, I do want to be clear. There are some PBMs that charge more than $6 per paid claim, and it could be a PEPM or PMPM at the end of the month or at the end of the year. You factor it all in, but it's going to come out to be very very similar. There are some PBMs that will charge an admin fee that is not artificially too low, claim to be passed through, and still rake in revenues through those three buckets that you see there. But a dead giveaway, a red flag is when that administrative fee is a, a dollar per paid claim, $2 per member per month, $5 per paid claim. A dead giveaway that PBM is augmenting that admin fee is when it is that low, artificially too low. And so, if you didn't like the first slide, here's a second slide from a different source that is saying essentially the exact same thing that the previous slide said. I can remember uh, working for Eli Lilly, and it was all about the small molecule, the non-specialty brand drug, the rebates. You got smart. You cut off that cash flow to the PBM. They shifted that cost somewhere else. Remember, mandatory mail order that went away, started to go away fairly quickly. When you cut off that, and there's a process, there's a name, a formal name for this process. It's called ballooning. It's called ballooning. When you cut off mandatory mail order, then those PBMs shifted that cost to specialty drug rebates. And now we're in a new phase already. Now you're starting to shut off the specialty drug rebates, and those PBMs now have already moved or shifted those costs to medical benefit drug claims. So now you're just now getting your footing and building your knowledge around managing the pharmacy benefit. And now a lot of your costs has been shifted to the medical benefit where drugs are concerned. And so now you have to start learning about crosswalking and J code drugs. And if you're not doing that today, you're already late to the party and you're playing catch up because those drugs on the medical side are being marked up 100% in some instances on the medical side because there's no one paying attention. So listen, it may sound like I'm bashing PBMs. I'm not. I happen to believe we have a very very good business model when it is done the right way. So my issue are the hidden cash flows to PBMs that generate their management fee. And that's what we're talking about here today, shedding some light on that. And so, in order to be able to do that, you have to understand the PBM business model. Let's spend 60 seconds on that. So, as a PBM, we contract with pharmacies to have sites from which prescriptions can be dispensed to our plan participants. We have to have clients who provide those services too. Those clients are health plans, unions, employers of all sizes, provided that they're self-funded, city, state, and even in some cases, if the PBM is large enough, federal governments, coalitions, you name it. We reimburse or pay pharmacies when they dispense prescriptions to our plan participants, and then we bill our clients for those dispensed prescriptions. The gamesmanship started with the contracts. It all starts with the contract nomenclature that dictates how the PBM can behave When a member shows up to the pharmacy, then the PBM pays the pharmacy and sends the bill to the plan sponsor, and then brings in revenue from the rebates from the drug manufacturer. The hidden cash flows, the deceptive tactics that PBMs can employ, the levers that they are left to pull start with the contract. And I'm not talking about the business associate agreement, where most of the time is spent on that. I'm talking about the definitions, essentially page one, and then your terms. So there's three problems when you see here, and this isn't a problem, but I want to make you aware. Unless the PBM owns a pharmacy, mail order, specialty, if a PBM owns a retail pharmacy, say a CVS Health, they should be operating separate from one another, right? The PBM shouldn't be calling over to the pharmacy saying, "Hey, can you do?" That shouldn't be happening, right? So unless a PBM owns the pharmacy, mail, specialty, uh, maybe home infusion, we never take control of the product. We never take control of the product. So, three primary problems with this particular diagram. First, the inflow of cash in the form of formulary rebates from the manufacturer to the PBM, and then ultimately that ends up in the bank account of the PBM's client is too low. I just showed you two separate sources that clearly indicate that 50% of a PBM's profit, despite what they tell you, comes from the manufacturer. 50% of the profit comes from the manufacturer. That means there's 50% of the profit that should have landed in your bank account that ultimately reduces the amount you and your staff pays. The second problem, the amount paid from the PBM client back to the PBM for the ingredient costs is too high. I'm going to talk about that for a second. So the inflow of cash in the form of rebates is too low. The outflow of cash to pay for the ingredient cost is too high. If that we can stop the webinar right now. If that's not enough to tick you off, what will? That leads me to the third problem. The third problem is look who sits at the very top of this system. Your clients do. You do. Yet you know the least about how it works. That's information asymmetry. It's right there staring you right in the face right now on your screen. That is information asymmetry at its best. So I talked about the second problem in terms of paying for the ingredient costs and the spreads. So the drug pricing standard, which forms the basis for discounted prices, AWP. It's not the only one, but it is the primary one. And I would argue that it doesn't matter whether it's AWP, ASP, NADAC. If the PBM isn't taking spreads, it doesn't matter what the price benchmark is. There's only so much pharmacies or so much discounts pharmacies are going to take. right? Uh, So at the end of the day, what matters most is the PBM taking spreads or not? Because I can tell you, PBMs negotiate hard with the pharmacy networks. That's not the problem. The problem is the PBMs keeping a portion of what they negotiate. That's what separates one PBM from another in terms of transparency and ingredient costs. So, the drug price standard, which forms the basis for discounted prices, is known as average wholesale price. Generic drugs, we're going to focus on generic drugs. Two price benchmarks, two primary price benchmarks for generic drugs: AWP, which is going to be AWP minus. So AWP is a list price. It doesn't reflect what anyone actually pays. It's a list price. It's the starting point, and then the discount is negotiated off of that. The MAC price is not a list price. It actually reflects what someone's paid. It actually reflects the transaction's cost. We'll talk a little bit more about MAC list here in a second. So let me show you here really quickly how spreads manifest. All right. So let's say that you have a drug. We have a drug that uh, the AWP price is $200, right? So let's call AWP equals $200. And this is horrible, I know. That's a bad two. Wow. Let's say the AWP is $200. Let's say you negotiate an 80% discount, or you achieve an 80% discount off of AWP for your generic drug purchases. That's going to be $160 discount. So 200 minus 160, and I'm doing this with my mouse, by the way. That leaves a cost of $40 to your plan, to the plan sponsor. Now, let's say that the MAC price, we go MAC here. Let's say the MAC price, remember, there's no discount off of MAC. It's a flat price. Whatever is on, if the product is on the PBM's MAC list, the PBM sets that price. Let's say that the MAC price is $15. And let's call this let's keep it easy. Let's call it a 30-day supply. That's how your cost is determined. What most plan sponsors are completely in the dark around is what the pharmacy was paid. The only way to know, and it's not because the PBM says we're pass through, it's not because the PBM says we're not taking any spreads. In fact, a PBM could say those things, but in the contract, it could be something completely different. And that's what matters. So to know if a spread is taking place, you have to know what your costs were. Easy enough. Easy enough. Maybe not for some, especially if you're part of a coalition. But anyway, you have to know what your costs are, and you have to know what the pharmacy was being reimbursed. Here's, I want to show you this here really quickly. Now, I want to show you um, NADAC pricing. And okay, now NADAC, National Average Drug Acquisition Cost. When I owned my pharmacy, we received this, I think it was via fax from the Centers from CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And they sent us a form, and they wanted us to send invoices that we had from our wholesalers so that they could then aggregate that data from primarily independent or regional pharmacies. I don't believe the chains at that time, the chains didn't participate, and I don't think they participate in this still. Anyway, there's enough pharmacies to get some very, very important information that is accurate anyway. I bring this up because the national average drug acquisition cost is uh, an average cost that all pharmacies that submitted their invoices to CMS paid. Now, there is a website just for NADAC at the CMS website. Go out to Google, type in NADAC data, something like that. You might not find it your first time, but NADAC will pop up and CMS will be on the first page, and you work your way through that website, and it lists all the drugs, and it's updated by NDC at unit cost. So it'll give you the price for one tablet, one capsule, and if you need 90, you just multiply it by 90. 46 Brooklyn has created this nice little tool where you can visualize that cost right from their website. Don't need to register anything. So let's go here and let's do cyclovir, and let's do uh, that's not the one I want. Let's go with cyclovir here. Is it going to take? There we go. And then we go over here. We select the dose, and bingo. And then you can hover over the date, and you can see what the unit cost is for that particular drug. This is information that you can now start to use. You just do a sample size. You don't need to do it for every drug, right? You don't need to do it for every drug, where you can start to now take a peek in and start to back in. Okay, are there spreads taking place here? This is what the pharmacy paid. They're going to get a dispensing fee on top of that, and looking for spreads within those differences. All right, so that's a nice little tool that I wanted to share with you guys. So let's get back to the webinar here. All right. All right, here we go. All right. Okay. So, all right, and so one of the reasons why there can be a difference in between what you pay and what the pharmacy was reimbursed is something that's called uh, differential pricing. And so, differential pricing uh, says this: the PBM can have a contract with you that calls for AWP minus 80% off of generics, right? And have a different contract uh, with the pharmacy with a bigger AWP discount that's going to cause them to be reimbursed less. So instead of AWP minus 80, it might be AWP minus 82 or 83 that they're going to be reimbursed, leaving the PBM with a 2 or 3% spread. And so billing terms between the PBM and the plan sponsor, in this example, AWP minus 50% to keep it simple. That means the plan sponsor is being billed 133, and not just the pricing benchmarks, not just the pricing being different, even between the same benchmarks, AWP, it could also be that your cost is based upon AWP minus, and the pharmacy's reimbursement is based upon MAC. MAC is going to be more aggressive in terms of pricing. That's why it's important to have as many generic drugs on the MAC list as possible because the MAC is just going to be more aggressive. Now, there are spreads that take place as high as $200. But generally speaking, what you will typically see are spreads in the neighborhood of $4 to $8 per claim. And this here is we we post this on our blog every week. We take some drugs, generic and small, a few brand, and we post on our blog uh, what the AWP price is and what the pharmacy actually paid. And you can see here in these examples some huge, huge differences between the AWP price, 277 here for losartan. The pharmacy only paid $3.49 to put that product into its inventory. Into its inventory. And so theoretically, let's just call this $300 and 80% generic effective rate would be a $240 discount. That leaves now a cost of $60 to that group. When the pharmacy only paid $3.50 to put the product on the shelf. So you can see here, even if the effective rate was 85%, even 90%, there is still the possibility of a spread taking place. But when that effective rate is hovering around 80, 81, 82, there is a spread taking place. All right, mail order really quickly. I know everyone assumes that mail order is automatically going to be less costly than going through retail. Not necessarily true. It depends. It depends on the contract primarily. I pulled this off of LinkedIn. It was posted by a broker maybe about a month or so ago, maybe a little bit more than that. I took a snapshot of it and I'm posting it here for you. You can see here that this particular mail order pharmacy, even when you sort to put the lowest price first, theirs is first, and its markup over what you can get at the Scarsdale Spencer independent pharmacy is 10 times higher. It's 10 times higher. Repackaging, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But what I will say about repackaging is this: from a PBM perspective, if a PBM wants to engage in allowing repackaging, it's a matter of, with the newer platforms today, it's a matter of checking or unchecking a box in the software system. Repackaging, you have to be licensed to do that. Usually mail order or a central fill or some sort of distribution that brings in huge, huge quantities. You've got a license from the FDA that says you can break down, you know, uh, buys of 1,000 tablets or 10,000 tablets, break it down into smaller package sizes, and you can break it down and then change the NDC because you've got that license. Effectively, making that repackager the original manufacturer of the product. And then, so the manufacturers establish the AWP. When you repackage, you are allowed to establish your own AWP. All right. Misleading contract language, MAC list, self-dealing, rebates by many names. Let me fly through this. Contract language leads the reason person believes there's only one MAC list. There are, in fact, multiple MAC lists. The key here is that the pharmacy's MAC list is going to be more comprehensive and more aggressive than the employer's MAC list. More comprehensive in that there will be more drugs on that MAC list from a pharmacy to PBM perspective, and the drugs that are on that list are going to have a lower cost because it's cash out of the PBM's bank account to the pharmacy than what you will have with the employer. So the employer's MAC list will be less comprehensive, meaning there's less drugs, and the prices on that MAC list won't be as aggressive than they are with the pharmacy, creating the spread. Rebates by many names. We showed you the slide, the U.S. Pharmacy Reimbursement and Distribution System, talking about the inflow of cash from the PBM back to the third party payer, you, in the form of rebates was too low. Part of the reason is that PBMs and manufacturers have these discussions about what they're willing to pay in terms of refunds, in other words, rebates back to the PBMs. The PBMs lead the charge in, okay, you're willing to pay $100 million in rebates, and out of that $100 million, we'd like for 15 million to go to formulary rebates. We'd like 25 million to go to access rebates. We'd like another 25 million to go to market share rebates. We'd like 35 million split between price protection rebates and outcomes based rebates. I'm going to talk more about that here in a second, but the gross in that bubble, manufacturers are starting to push back now because listen, there's blame to go around for everyone. Manufacturers, hospitals, wholesalers, PBMs, there's enough blame to go around for everyone who's not putting the patient first. Say they're putting the patient first, but actions say something different. The gross in that bubble is just simply saying this, that um, uh, the net, when manufacturers increase prices, the net that they are able to keep is here, but the gross is 5.7, and that difference is rebates that the PBMs are keeping. Some manufacturers have started to make this information public on their websites. I talked about renaming rebates. This was information that was disclosed publicly about 3 years ago now. The lawsuit happened long before that, but this was made public about 3 years ago and some change. And what you're able to learn here is exactly what I just touched on. Express Scripts sued Kaleo for rebate payments Kaleo refused to make. No question that I believe Kaleo owed that money. They just didn't think Express Scripts would go after it, making the claim public. The reason I raise this issue is because you can see here, and by the way, you can go out. I think I may even attach it as part one of the materials to this. But the formulary rebate here's the payment for the formulary rebate for one drug. The administrative fee, which is not the administrative fee that I was talking about earlier, that uh, an employer might pay for 24-hour customer support, or a member portal, or just the electronic claims processing, right? That's what that administrative fee covers. This administrative fee is an administrative fee between the PBM and the drug manufacturer. It's got nothing to do with the first administrative fee. It's a rebate that you're entitled to. But when this uh, rebate is not addressed in the contract language, guess what happens? The PBM keeps it, and your costs go up. This is that same claim, and you will see here that there's a third one that was added called a price protection rebate, inflationary rebates. You'll see it referred to as in contracts sometimes. When the price of a product is increased by a manufacturer uh, fairly rapidly in a short period of time, or there's a big jump in a short period of time, then there's a rebate paid on that price increase. If that isn't addressed in the contract language, guess what? The PBM keeps it. Software in the back end, and they've got people who it is their job, analysts who it is their job to know what levers they have to pull based upon the contract to grow and generate revenue for the PBM. Right? There are other names for rebates as well. Product discounts is another one. You wouldn't think that that phrase is a rebate, but it is. Outcomes rebates. This has been happening for over 10 years. If um, the PBMs and the manufacturer sit down, they agree on the metrics, they agree on the drugs that those metrics are going to apply to. And when that drug falls short, then the manufacturer pays a refund, a rebate. Sometimes it's 100%. Sometimes it's less than 100%. It's all based upon the metrics and what was agreed upon between the PBM and the drug manufacturer. And guess what? When that is not addressed in the contract language, the PBM keeps it. When their revenue model encompasses rebates. And so this is what um, our form looks like when we submit rebates to our rebate aggregator. And by the way, all PBMs are using the aggregator now for different purposes, but it is a fairly detailed uh, spreadsheet or CSV file that we send to our rebate aggregator every month. And this thing probably goes over to row BZ, something crazy, right? So when you hear about PBMs making money from data, it's stuff like this because the manufacturers want to have this data, and this is how rebate aggregation works. And so it's essentially uh, the PBM gets the file, and uh, uh, the PBM gets the file, sends it to the rebate aggregator. The rebate aggregator has a contract with the manufacturer. The manufacturer gets the claims file the uh, from the PBM, the rebate aggregator, reconciles that against the contract. It's all done through software, and then they send the payment back to the aggregator, and then the aggregators will then send that money then off to the uh, to their clients. Give me 1 second here. All right. All right. All right. This is what you're looking at here is there's about 6 PBMs that control 95% of the market. And that's no exaggeration. That controls 95% of the market between 6 PBMs. And here recently, they have formed GPOs or group purchasing organizations. Now, you know, there's some opinions out there on why PBMs did it, but let me tell you why. The PBM Transparency Act and all the talk about requiring PBMs to disclose the money that they bring in for rebates. By switching to a GPO model, now PBMs, instead of keeping rebate dollars, can charge manufacturers GPO management fees. They call them GMF fees, GPO management fees or GMF fees. But the problem is that those fees all come from the same bucket of rebate dollars. They all come from the same bucket of rebate dollars. All right, so here's the bottom line is I talked about information asymmetry and the PBMs making it difficult, and give me 3 minutes here. PBMs making it difficult to ascertain their management fee. So the focus, and so I'm not suggesting that brand effective rates and generic effective rates and rebates paid aren't important. Of course they are. But more important is how much money is the PBM keeping at the end of the year as a result of the services that it is providing to a specific client. Because the least amount, a lower amount that it keeps means that your discount rates perform better. You get paid more rebates. If the PBM is printing money, then your discounts are too low and the rebates that you're receiving back are too low as well. When we go to manufacturers and negotiate, those rebates, those refunds are finite. They're not unlimited. They're set in stone. We don't go and renegotiate as those claims are being processed through the contract term. The same is true for pharmacy networks. We go, we sit down, we negotiate reimbursement rates, and they're done. They're done. So then when you begin to negotiate with PBMs, what you're really negotiating for is what you're going to allow them to keep. The very, very sophisticated purchasers allow the PBMs enough to do what we do. Pay the bills and have a little money on the side to take a vacation or two. When the PBM's client isn't sophisticated, or they are, let me put it this, when they are overmatched, they're paying for the overhead and then some. Really, I don't know of any other industry where this is true. The genius of it all, the genius of it all is that PBM's management fee, because they haven't been held to account for, okay, how much am I going to, this is how much I believe the service you're offering is worth, and this is what we're going to pay. And that's it. Everything else you pass back through to us. No one has ever held them to account for that. The genius of it all is that the PBM's management fee, what it is being paid, is hidden here. Because when a plan overpays here, we talked about spreads. And then when it is underpaid here, that goes into the PBM's bank account, but it increases your cost, your client's cost. The CEO of CVS Health said this just a few years back when he said during an earnings call, in layman's terms, we're going to make as much money as we possibly can. The amount of money that we're going to make is ultimately going to depend upon how sophisticated or unsophisticated our clients are. We're going to make as much money as we can, and we're going to do that by the contract. I told you. by the contract. The sophisticated clients are going to eliminate most, if not all, the levers we pull for the money that we make above and beyond an administrative fee. The clients that are overmatched aren't going to eliminate nearly enough levers, thereby allowing them to maximize hidden cash flows. That's what that says in layman's terms. And so when I talk about the amount of money that the PBM is making, let's put a name to it. We call it earnings after cash disbursements. Fancy way of saying the PBM's management fee, right? And so the PBM's management fee, everything in green at some point lands in the PBM's bank account. In red are dollars that leave the PBM's bank account, a share of rebates. When the PBM reimburses a pharmacy that dispenses a prescription to a plan participant, you can see this clear as day. All of this lands in the PBM's bank account. They're trying to keep as much of it as they possibly can by dispersing as little as they can. You can see it clear as day on this screen. The new path says this: ideally, every plan sponsor would be able to enter into a fiduciary agreement, a standard of care with their PBM. We know that's not realistic, but there's no better standard of care, period, when it is real and to the letter of the law. There's no better standard of care when the PBM has to act in your best interest, even when it hurts them. Just beneath that is something we refer to as radical transparency. The difference between the two is that fiduciary standard, if a PBM offers it, every client gets it. Radical transparency is dealing with a PBM that doesn't offer a fiduciary standard or would prefer to have all of these different revenue sources or levers available to them so they can make as much money as possible. Radical transparency, you're eliminating those levers yourself through your knowledge and your sophistication. You're eliminating those levers and you're driving to radical transparency. So radical transparency is earned. But at the end of the day, the radical transparency and a fiduciary standard delivers the same cost. Just how you go about achieving them is different. And I'm wrapping up here. Uh, so, real quick, um, we brought this client on in 2020. They're still a client. When we brought them on, their PMPM was 57.88. In the first year, their PMPM was $23.12. That's all in. That's net of rebates, admin fees, you name it. That's all in. Prime dwarfs us in terms of size. In terms of size, they dwarf us. So you would think that they would be able to deliver a better cost. Not when they're using levers to drive revenue for themselves when their clients aren't eliminating those levers. The point I want to make here is this $35 difference in PMPM between the two is the earnings after cash disbursements for Prime Therapeutics. The thing that ticks me off the most about this, we're talking about healthcare. We're not talking about oil or advertising, or a bone-in ribeye, prime bone-in ribeye. We're not talking about overpaying for that stuff. No one's going to die because they can't afford a bone-in ribeye. The thing that ticks me off the most about this is Prime Therapeutics management fee. Its earnings after cash disbursements is higher than what the drugs cost. They were making more for themselves than what the drugs actually cost. Think about that for a second. They marked up the cost of the pharmacy benefit service, the management part of it, at least 100% over what the drugs cost. So listen, you're here because you're aware that a problem exists and you're thinking about doing something, whatever that problem is. Maybe you want to break into the industry. Maybe you have a client where drug costs are getting out of control, or you believe they're going to get out of control, and you want to see if there's something that you can do about it. Maybe you just have a segment of the drug benefit, say specialty drugs, that is out of control. But you're here for a reason. And so now, based upon what you learned today, listen, we went over a lot today, but we didn't even listen. There's so much more to this, right? There's so much more to this. And so now you've got to take some action. Education is the key, folks. Education is the key. Everything we do and what we start with is about education. We've got the first certified program around pharmacy benefits in the country. That is backed by a major university offering continuing education. Some of you are here because you're thinking about taking that course. Read the testimonials, see what people say about the course. Real quick, not name dropping here, but this is important to me, and I hope it is to you. I was a I went through the Michigan State School of Business the whole time, and it was named it's the Broad School of Business, not Broad. It doesn't pronounce Broad; it pronounces it Broad actually. Um, and so I went through school not knowing who he was. It wasn't until later after graduation I said, let me find out who this cat is. Picked up his autobiography. I took this excerpt from his autobiography. Turns out he's the only person ever. Elon Musk may at some one day eclipse that, but he's the only person ever to be a founder of two Fortune 500 companies, KB Homes and Sun Life Financial. He did that. He spent after retirement, he spent his money and his time dedicated to two things: art and health. If he believes education is the key, who am I to question that? I'm going to piggyback off of that. And so I'm wrapping up on this. I know jack about cars, nothing about cars. I get in them and I drive them. When something goes wrong, I get a little nervous. I go to the repair shop because I don't want to get taken. I, I don't want to overpay. I walk in, bang my fist on the desk, and say, I don't want that service that you're recommending. I don't need it. I need this, in hopes that I can convince this person that I know what I'm talking about. Because really, I don't want him or her to know I got no clue. Inevitably, I end up on the side of the road, flat tire, something like that. Unless I'm dealing with a reputable, Google reviewed 4.5 star or up repair shop, or I take someone in there with me who knows what the heck that they're talking about. Don't be me, beating your hand on your chest, screaming, pounding if you don't know anything about cars. Take someone with you or learn about them. That is my time today. I'm going to stick around for a